Hey you guys, out here at the Riverwalk again. Very humid day today. And my last talk about domination. I've developed that a bit further, but I'm not going to talk about that today. I've talked to quite a few people about it, personally, in person. And it's quite an idea. So anyway, the idea of people being dislocated, disconnected from anything, and then essentially being trapped in the domain of thought and emotion and attempting to exert domination in order to feel a connection or create a connection, and then of course deny that they're even doing it, is a good definition of the majority of people living on Earth, unless you count in your Dalai Lamas and enlightened people and Christs and things like that. Well, anyway, another thing lately, I have a few online social accounts. One is Instagram, and somehow out of the blue began to create cartoons. I had an idea for one, and the format was that they would be square. So being square, they fit perfectly on Instagram. Well, I created a few, and they were all more or less, PG. Put them up there, and lo and behold, they were getting more views, more interest apparently than my regular artwork, which admittedly is a sort of a niche thing. Fantasy art, I suppose, comics. So anyway, it's like, the whole thing about getting a little charge from, likes and things like that, getting a little, morphine in the brain. I guess it was pleasant. Of course, I look at these things as a business, and it's like if a publicity stunt works, then perhaps it'll help me to support my family and pay my bills. That's the way I look at it. So anyway, I continued to create these cartoons, put some more of them out, and I didn't really try to censor them in any way. So put some out about religion and science and things like that. And what I noticed about these controversial topics was that the number of views and likes and everything went down. And oddly enough, I really liked that. It's like the fact that these ideas are being rejected, in a sense, supports them. And so anyway, one that I put up yesterday has it's actually got, the views are going back up again, but I'm getting some angry comments. And basically I'll show it to you, but this cartoon post basically says, religion causes more problems than it solves, and so does science. People flipped out. It's like, oh, no. How nonsensical, Science is the savior. It saves us from silly, religion and paranormal and, baloney like that. Well, going back to domination, the idea of domination, it's like, well, you're going to go online and you're going to, be in a conversation with someone or make a statement or something. And like, the whole point of the statement is to dominate. Perhaps the whole point of my putting these cartoons out there is to dominate in some way. So I won't say it's not, and I won't say it will. It is. But at any rate, so two sides of the same coin. You've got a camp of people that think religion is the way, and the camp of people that think that science is the way. Oh, science has done so much. And another cartoon I did, which I haven't posted yet, basically says, science always has the first word. Hey there. Science always has the first word and never the last. Which is about right, because they'll step into any dialogue and claim to have all the answers, but ultimately they have no answers. They can't explain what matter is, can't explain why there's something instead of nothing, can't explain anything, really. They can cut things into little bits, though. So anyway, say for example you wanted to have an argument or discussion about whether or not science has been beneficial to man, human race. Well, think about the human race going back in history, hundreds of thousands of years. You know, there was no real technology. There was fire making and spears and bows and arrows and things like that. And that was probably the most happy that mankind has ever been, fully connected to each other and to the environment. And some people would immediately argue that, saying, well, the lifespan was not as long. And it's like, well, lifespans, you can extend the lifespan of any animal, humans, by doing various things. For example, lowering the oxygen intake. But you don't get a happy camper. You don't get a happy animal. You don't get a happy person. You get an animal that lives longer but suffers. So, okay, lifespans have gone up. But in some of these so-called primitive societies, people live to be 80, 90 anyway. So, So, as to whether science has improved life on Earth for people, think about a few things. Think about where we are right now in America, much of the Western world. Go to Walmart and look in the parking lot. 3 out of 4 people are obese. Why? Because science took over food production. Now, admittedly, the science purists will say, well, that's technology, that's farming, that's something different. Okay, well, science purism, if that's such a word, you could say, well, is that just numbers on paper, theoretical formulas? That's really what science is? And when it becomes applied, that's no longer science? Science and technology are different? It's like, no, they're not. Just like the ideas of religion and the actions of religion, you wouldn't say those are separate. Wars in the name of religion. Okay, so sorry, you can't get out that way that easily. So anyway, what has science done? Well, you might say, well, it's created vaccines, increased the food supply. Well, okay, food supply is worse. People are getting sicker. Oh, well, it's created, drugs for illness. Well, the illness that it created. The drugs, big pharma, well, all those drugs make you sick too. So, what about the earth itself? What about global warming? The transformation of the content of atmospheric gases. What is that due to? Directly due to science and technology. That's what it's due to. So anyway, here we are at a tipping point, they say, in terms of the Earth's climate. All kinds of horrible weather events happening around the world. Science has no part in that? Really, science is the cause of that. Science and technology is the cause of that. So anyway, when science is your religion, of course, you don't want to hear stuff like this. You want to argue and you want to be on that side against the other side. Well, science applied ethically would be a good thing. We don't do that. Some ideals of religion applied ethically would be good. We don't do that. So, take for example, Christ, right? Christ consciousness, the person coming to earth to talk about something, to relay some information, and basically what he was getting at, which is misunderstood, misinterpreted, and misused, is that the entire universe is one thing. He called it God. You could call it creation, the universe, the all that is. You could call it all kinds of things, put a word on it. But what he was saying was that that is what we are connected to. And he said, deny thyself. Basically, deny your own identity and join with that as I have and be connected. Regain your connection. People misunderstood, misinterpreted, and used it for domination. Because of their disconnect, they are trapped in a domain of thought and emotion. So, That's where most people are today. Thought and emotion and domination, as much as they may try to deny it. So let's see, where was I? Science. Oh yeah, the cartoons I've been putting up. They I don't think I'm going to reply on Instagram necessarily. I'm going to continue to put them up, and they kind of are coming out of my psyche, and I'm going to wind up putting them in a book probably. Working title might be Gags to Make You Gag, or something like that. Because, as a matter of fact, I had an idea for one today. This one actually was not original to me, but it's a phrase that I heard once somewhere. And what the fellow said was that science advances one funeral at a time. And your scientific types would say, oh, that's horribly cruel and insensitive to say that. We should, glorify our scientists and worship them, elevate them. It's like, no. The point is that when you die and your consciousness continues, then you get it. Now, I'm not asking that you believe it. I'm just suggesting that perhaps you don't disbelieve it. Because this experience, like psychic experiences, out of body, near death, all these experiences, they've been reported millions and millions of people for years and years and years. Science absolutely refuses to look at any of them because science believes that they are intrinsically impossible from the get-go. Well, what happens when you have an experience is that it gives you knowledge. You don't have to believe anything, any dogma, any prescription given by someone else. You now have an experience, and it gives you knowledge. So just like the Aborigines in Australia had a ritual by which they would elicit the near-death experience as a, a rite of passage for young men. They would, sometimes the person would die, but a lot of times they didn't. Most of the time, because they had it down pretty well. So the person would basically cross over to the next dimensional plane and see things fully, that there was indeed another dimension, another plane. And when they came back, they had a much deeper understanding. They understood the reality of reincarnation and so on. So anyway, the pro-science types that refuse to see anything else, that are dogmatic and as religious as religion, the other side of the same coin, when they refuse to look at this stuff, it's understandable why. Because they are trying to dominate. They're not trying to learn. They're not trying to grow. They are, in a sense, stuck, stunted. And will continue to be until they have some sort of experience that enlightens them. Maybe ayahuasca will do it, maybe something will do it. Different cultures have had different ways to elicit this kind of experience. Very slick spot here, I'll be careful. But anyway, they're going to stick to it with all their guns because their egos and their identities are all tied up with it. Got so much invested in it. But the whole idea of science is that it's basically deconstructing things, dissecting things. Oh, we're going to take the atom, break it into parts. We're going to take this leaf and break it. We're going to dissect the animal, the person, the universe, and we're going to learn everything by cutting things into little pieces. And you look at all the little pieces and you don't understand anything. That's because in the universe, and again, don't take my word for it, in the universe, consciousness is primary. Matter doesn't really exist. It's secondary. So this comes through in some physics that the observer affects the outcome of the experiment, and not necessarily experiments, but also the idea that there's no reality without the observer to observe it. So consciousness is primary, matter, or whatever the hell that is secondary. Could be a dream, who knows, could be light. I've heard a theory that light particles, so-called atomic particles, are basically just light that's been funneled down in a cone and is essentially trapped and creates the illusion of solidity. And then again, with nuclear energy and fusion and things like that, that kind of illustrates it, that there's so much energy tied up, locked up down there on this level, subatomic level. So anyway, the poor little science people, it's so tragic. And when it comes to what science has done, basically science is about to kill the whole motherfucking earth, okay? So you don't, and I use that comically, you don't need to pretend that it's the savior of us when it's our doom. And that's where we are.